Write in the comments where you are watching from and at what time, so I can get to know you better. To support the channel for free, don't forget to subscribe and like. There are records that bleed ink even when they're locked away. Tonight, we delve into a file that was never meant to be opened. The classified case of the Obsidian Archive, a collection of documents so disturbing they were accessed for a single day in 1977 and then sealed forever. Write in the comments where you are watching from and at what time, so I can get to know you better. To support the channel for free, don't forget to subscribe and like. Some vaults are not meant to protect what's inside from the world, but to protect the world from what's inside. Narrator, November 11th, 1987. To the world, it was just another Wednesday. But deep beneath the unassuming facade of the Northmore Federal Records Depository in rural Pennsylvania, a countdown reached zero. This was not a launch sequence or a security drill. It was an error, a catastrophic, unrepeatable system failure that for 24 hours unlocked the most secret library in human history, the Obsidian Archive. There are no public records of this event, no congressional inquiries, no declassified summaries. The official narrative is that nothing happened at all. But silence, as we know, is often the loudest confession. The Obsidian Archive was never a physical place filled with paper and dust. It was a quantum data repository, a cold, dark server farm designed to hold not just information, but foundational truths. Data so dangerous, so reality-altering, that its very existence was classified above top secret. For decades, it sat dormant, a sleeping dragon of information, guarded by protocols so complex they were rumored to be sentient. But on that November day, a cascade failure in a geothermal power conduit triggered a system reboot. A 1 in a trillion flaw in the core code created a single, unsecured access window. For 24 hours, the vault was open. We don't know who or what got in. We only know about the panic that followed. Leaked communications, heavily distorted and unverified, speak of a level Omega contagion alert. Not a biological contagion, but an informational one. The fear was that a single kilobyte from the archive, released into the fledgling networks of the 1980s, could irrevocably poison our collective understanding of reality. The breach wasn't discovered for 3 hours. In that time, logs show anomalous data pings from untraceable sources. Were these automated systems? Or was someone somewhere looking in? The response was unprecedented. A total communications blackout was imposed on a 50-mile radius. A specialized unit, one that doesn't officially exist, was deployed not to investigate, but to contain. Their objective was simple: seal the archive, digitally and physically, and erase any evidence that the breach had ever occurred. By 11:59 p.m. on November 12th, the window was slammed shut. New firewalls were implemented, physical connections were severed, and the entire facility was entombed in concrete. The Obsidian Archive was resealed. But a question lingers in the absolute silence that surrounds this event. What did they see? What piece of forbidden knowledge was glimpsed in that brief, terrifying window? And more importantly, in the rush to close the door, did something slip out? The narrator. Every cover-up needs a cover story. A bland, bureaucratic explanation designed to deflect curiosity and bury the truth under a mountain of paperwork. For the Obsidian Archive, that story was codenamed Project Chimera. If you were to file a Freedom of Information Act request on the Northmore Depository for November 1987, you would eventually receive a heavily redacted, almost entirely useless document. This document, designated USARC Docs 734 Alpha, is the official sanitized record. It speaks of a routine system integrity test and a simulated network vulnerability exercise. It mentions a temporary power fluctuation, attributing it to a faulty generator. The entire event is framed as a successful drill, a testament to the facility's robust security. But the devil is in the details, or rather in the lack of them. Over 95% of the document is redacted. Entire pages are just solid black bars, hiding everything from personnel lists to technical readouts. The few words left visible are intentionally mundane: protocol, assessment, standard procedure. It's a masterclass in bureaucratic misdirection. Project Chimera wasn't the name of the archive itself. It was the name of the containment and disinformation protocol established to manage its existence. Its primary directive was to ensure that the Obsidian Archive remained a myth, a ghost story whispered among conspiracy theorists. The project's architects understood a fundamental truth about information. An outlandish lie is easier to dismiss than a heavily redacted truth. So, they created layers of conflicting rumors. Some insiders were led to believe Northmore housed backup data for the continuity of government. Others were told it was a Cold War-era dead hand switch. These controlled leaks were designed to create a fog of speculation, making it impossible for any outside investigator to find a coherent thread. We analyzed the unredacted portions of document 734 Alpha. The timestamps are the first clue that something is wrong. The report claims the drill began at 9:00 a.m. on November 11th. Yet, ancillary records from regional power grids show a massive, unexplained energy surge from the facility's location at 12:01 a.m., 9 hours earlier. The document also refers to the deployment of the Technical Assessment Group 7. There is no official record of such a group. However, a cross-reference with leaked Pentagon budgets from the era shows a single, cryptic line item for a rapid ontological containment unit, a name that suggests a purpose far beyond a simple server check. This is the strategy of Project Chimera: to create a reality that is technically true, but factually a lie. Yes, there was a power issue. Yes, a team was deployed. But the context, the why, is completely fabricated. The official record is a carefully constructed fiction, a Potemkin village of facts designed to hide the terrifying reality of what happened when the archive was opened, and why it was so desperately resealed. Narrator: in the sanitized world of Project Chimera, there is no room for human error or human curiosity. There is especially no room for Dr. Alistair Finch. His name does not appear on any official roster for the Northmore Depository. His academic records from MIT, where he was a celebrated prodigy in theoretical data structures, end abruptly in 1985. According to the state, Alistair Finch ceased to exist 2 years before the breach. But he was there. Finch was not a security officer or a government agent. He was a librarian, a digital archivist of the highest order, one of only 3 people in the world qualified to interface with the archive's esoteric architecture. He was recruited for his unique ability to see patterns in informational chaos, to understand data not just as code, but as a living entity. On the night of November 11, 1987, Dr. Finch was on duty. He was the first to see the alert. Not a blaring alarm, but a quiet, single line of code that scrolled across his terminal, a line that should have been impossible. It read, "Catalog integrity compromised, external query detected." From what we've pieced together from anonymous sources and encrypted fragments he supposedly left behind, Finch didn't panic. he was by nature a methodical man. He tried to initiate the standard lockdown protocol, but his commands were rejected. The system was not responding. For 3 hours, he was locked out of his own kingdom, forced to watch as the archive, his life's work, communicated with an unknown outsider. He couldn't see what information was being accessed. The logs themselves were being rewritten in real time, leaving behind a ghost trail of corrupted data. What he could see was the archive's internal behavior. He described it as a scream. The data wasn't being copied, it was being observed, and the act of observation was causing a paradoxical feedback loop. The archive was, in his words, folding in on itself. When the containment team finally stormed the control room, they didn't find a frantic technician. They found Alistair Finch sitting perfectly still, staring at a blank monitor. He refused to speak. He was immediately taken into custody. This is where his story officially ends. He was debriefed, discredited, and subjected to a campaign of systematic erasure. Friends and family were told he had suffered a severe mental breakdown. Colleagues were reassigned and bound by NDAs so restrictive they couldn't even mention his name. Dr. Alistair Finch became a ghost, the first casualty of the 24-hour breach. But ghosts leave traces. Before he disappeared, Finch understood that his official testimony would be buried. He needed to get the truth out. He created a record of his own, a final desperate memorandum detailing not just the event, but the horrifying nature of what he believed the Obsidian Archive truly contained. Narrator. It surfaced a decade ago on a defunct cryptography forum, a single encrypted text file attached to a post by a long-deleted user. It was called simply Memorandum AF. For years, it was dismissed as elaborate fiction. But as we cross-referenced its technical jargon with other leaked documents, a chilling possibility emerged. This was the final testament of Dr. Alistair Finch. The Finch Memorandum is not a simple report. It's a frantic, desperate, and at times incoherent warning. Finch wasn't just a gatekeeper. He was one of the few who understood the archive's true purpose. He writes, "It is not a record of the past. It is a cage for it." According to Finch, the Obsidian Archive does not contain information about our history. It contains the data streams of alternate histories, timelines that were pruned, aborted, or overwritten. He describes it as a cemetery of dead realities. He claims that our reality is merely the most stable, dominant version that has survived, and the archive acts as a quantum sinkhole, holding the ghosts of what could have been, preventing them from bleeding back into our own. During the breach, Finch watched the logs and saw what the external query was accessing. It wasn't military secrets or alien technology. It was targeting what he called nexus events, historical moments where other timelines had branched off. The fall of Rome, the Black Death, the discovery of the Americas. The memorandum contains terrifying excerpts of the data he managed to glimpse. He describes seeing a data map of a world where the Alexandrian library never burned, leading to a technologically advanced Roman Empire that lasted 2,000 years. He saw another where the Americas were never colonized, and indigenous civilizations developed technologies based on biology, not mechanics. These weren't stories. They were, in his words, fully coherent, self-contained histories with their own physics, their own peoples, their own tragedies. The true horror of the breach, Finch explains, was not that someone was looking in. It was that the very act of observing these dead timelines could potentially re-energize them. The information wasn't just being read, it was being given a foothold. This is why the archive was so violently resealed. The fear was that a piece of another reality, an idea, a law of physics, a forgotten plague, could leak out and destabilize our own. In his final terrifying passage, Finch writes, "We closed the door, but the lock is weaker now. For 24 hours, the walls of our reality grew thin. I don't know what they saw, but I am certain we are now being watched by the ghosts we thought we had buried." The archive was opened. The silence that followed is not peace. It is the sound of something holding its breath. Dr. Finch was never seen again after his detention, but his memorandum is a stark reminder of why the Obsidian Archive was sealed and why it must never, ever be opened again. Write in the comments where you are watching from and at what time, so I can get to know you better. To support the channel for free, don't forget to subscribe and like. Some doors are sealed for a reason. Narrator. Below the scorched earth of an unnamed desert, 7 stories underground, lies a place that officially does not exist. This is the Obsidian Archive, and we are going deeper than anyone has gone since the incident. Welcome to Level 7. This wasn't just a storage floor. It was a containment vessel, a Faraday cage the size of a city block, designed to isolate its single, enigmatic occupant. Item 0001. When the archive was briefly opened in 1983, the primary mission of Dr. Eris Thorne's team was to descend to Level 7 and finally decode the artifact that had been dormant for decades. The initial reports sent topside were filled with clinical excitement. They described the level as unnaturally cold, with a persistent, low-frequency hum that defied all their diagnostic equipment. The air itself felt heavy, charged with static electricity. But then, the daily logs began to change. On day 4, the first mention of the whispers appears. Not sound, not in the traditional sense. The team's audio recorders picked up nothing but the ambient hum. The whispers were internal. Junior researcher Lena Petrova was the first to report it in her psych evaluation. It's like hearing a conversation from the other side of a thick wall. You can't make out the words, but you feel the cadence, the intent. By day 6, the entire team had reported similar experiences. Dr. Thorne, a man of staunch skepticism, noted in his private log, "The phenomenon is uniform. It feels structured. We've begun to suspect it's not an auditory hallucination, but a direct cortical response to proximity with Item 01. The artifact is broadcasting, but not on any frequency we can measure. It's broadcasting directly into our neurology. They called it bioresonance." The whispers started as unintelligible murmurs, but soon team members began hearing snippets of language, dead languages, mathematical proofs, star charts that didn't match known space. The data they were pulling from the artifact was equally bizarre. It wasn't code in a digital sense. It was a form of living information that rearranged itself when observed. It was quantum data, but with a terrifying twist. It seemed to possess a kind of predatory awareness. The final coherent report from Level 7 spoke of the whispers coalescing. They were no longer just hearing fragments. They were hearing a voice. It never spoke to 2 people in the same way, but it had one unifying message for all of them. A question. A question so profound, so fundamental to the nature of existence, that simply comprehending it, according to Thorne's last frantic transmission, was enough to unmoor a person from consensual reality. The whispers from Level 7 were not a sign of a haunting. They were the first symptom of an infection, an information plague, and the team was patient 0. The order to reseal the archive was already being drafted. Narrator, Day 21 of the Obsidian Archive expedition. 0433. Zulu time. All data streams from Dr. Thorne's team on Level 7 ceased transmission simultaneously. Not a power failure, not an equipment malfunction. One moment, they were transmitting terabytes of incomprehensible data. The next, there was only digital silence. For 12 agonizing hours, the Surface Command team tried to re-establish contact. Radio calls were met with static. Attempts to activate the level's internal cameras failed. The emergency data link, a hard line designed to withstand a direct nuclear strike, was dead. Finally, the order was given. A heavily armed recovery team was sent down. The journey to Level 7 was an exercise in tension. The elevator descended through 6 levels of silent, empty halls, each one a monument to a secret history we may never know. But nothing could have prepared them for what they found. Or rather, what they didn't find. The main laboratory on Level 7 was pristine. Terminals were still logged in, displaying cascading lines of the alien code from Item 001. A half-finished cup of coffee sat on a console, still warm. Personal effects were left exactly where you'd expect them to be. But the 6 members of Dr. Eris Thorne's research team were gone. There was no sign of a struggle. No blood, no overturned furniture, no indication of any kind of violence or panic. The level's internal security logs were wiped clean for the final 90 minutes before the blackout. The only thing out of place was a single message, scrawled across a large whiteboard in the center of the lab, in Dr. Thorne's unmistakable handwriting. It wasn't a warning or a cry for help. It was 5 words. "We see the symmetry now." That's it. They had vanished from a sealed room 7 stories underground, leaving behind nothing but a cryptic epitaph. Investigators, specialists in every field from forensics to theoretical physics, were baffled. They accounted for every possibility. A secret exit? The level was scanned with ground-penetrating radar. It was a solid box of reinforced concrete and lead. A chemical agent? Air samples showed nothing anomalous. A new form of weapon? There were no bodies to examine. It was a perfect, impossible disappearance. They were erased from existence. This event triggered the highest-level containment protocol, Operation Sundown. The recovery team was extracted, placed in a lifelong quarantine, and the elevator shaft to Level 7 was filled with concrete. The entire archive, from top to bottom, was declared a tomb. The official report, buried so deep it might as well be on the dark side of the moon, lists the 6 researchers as lost in a training exercise. But those who know, those who have seen the fragmented evidence, understand the truth. The team didn't get lost. They answered the question posed by the whispers. And in doing so, they ceased to be the narrator. When a secret is too big to hide, you bury it in paperwork. After the Obsidian Archive was permanently resealed, a mountain of reports was generated. And in those reports, a new language was born. A language of redaction and code words, designed to obscure the terrifying truth of what happened on Level 7. Let's examine a key document, leaked by an anonymous source. Incident Post-Mortem 7 Alpha. Even on a surface level, it's a masterpiece of obfuscation. Over 80% of the text is covered by thick black bars. But the words left visible are more chilling than anything they could possibly be hiding. The disappearance is never called a disappearance. It's referred to as a cognitive integration event, The research team members are not missing, they are assimilated. These are not bureaucratic euphemisms. They are precise technical descriptions of an event for which we have no public frame of reference. The artifact, Item 001, is given a new designation in these documents: the Librarian. This code word is key. A librarian doesn't just store information, it curates it, organizes it, and provides access to it. This implies that the artifact is not a passive object. It is an active intelligence, managing a library of cosmic and perhaps forbidden knowledge. And Dr. Thorne's team? They were the first to check out a book. The Whispers were also given a chillingly sterile classification: Echo Class Memetic Hazard. A memetic hazard is not a virus of the body, but a virus of the mind. An idea, a concept, or a piece of information so powerful that simple exposure to it can alter perception, behavior, or even one's physical state of being. The report suggests the echo is the librarian's defense mechanism, or perhaps its method of communication. It doesn't speak to you, it rewrites you. The most ominous code word of all is the name of the containment protocol itself: Operation Sundown. It wasn't just about closing the facility. Leaked communications reveal Sundown was a multi-stage protocol. Stage 1 was the physical sealing. Stage 2 involved the systematic erasure of the project from government records. Stage 3, which is officially listed as pending, outlines a frightening contingency: the detonation of a subterranean nuclear device directly beneath the archive. The trigger for Stage 3? Any evidence that the Echo-class memetic hazard has breached the containment of Level 7. Any sign that the Librarian is still whispering. These documents don't tell us what happened to Dr. Thorne. They tell us what the people in charge fear happened. They fear the team didn't just disappear. They became a part of the library itself. And they fear that one day, the Librarian might decide to share its newfound knowledge with the rest of the world. Narrator. For decades, the story of the Obsidian Archive remained a terrestrial secret, a ghost story whispered among the intelligence community. But what if the silence from Level 7 wasn't an ending? What if it was the beginning of a conversation? To understand the possible cosmic implications, we must turn our attention to Arecibo, Puerto Rico. For over 50 years, this colossal dish was our ear to the universe, listening for any sign that we are not alone. In 1974, we sent our own message, the Arecibo message, a digital greeting card to the stars. We never expected a reply. But a single heavily corrupted data fragment recovered from Dr. Thorne's terminal before the blackout suggests someone or something did reply. And the reply didn't come from the stars. It came from Level 7. The fragment, barely a few kilobytes, contains a complex waveform analysis. Thorne's notes in the margin are frantic. It's not a broadcast. It's a reply. The structure is a near-perfect inversion of the 1974 Arecibo signal. It's answering our call. The data suggests that Item 001, the Librarian, had been silently listening to our planetary communications for years. When the Arecibo message was sent, it didn't just travel out into space. A copy of it traveled through the global information network and eventually into the archive. The Librarian had received our message. And according to Thorne, it was preparing a response. This brings us to a documented but unexplained event known to radio astronomers as the Arecibo Anomaly of 1984, just months after the archive was sealed. For 72 seconds, the Arecibo telescope was bombarded by a powerful narrow-band signal of unknown origin. It was highly structured, non-random, but it defied all attempts at decryption. It was dismissed as a possible military satellite malfunction and largely forgotten. But when you place the waveform from the anomaly next to the waveform from Dr. Thorne's recovered data fragment, they are a terrifying match. The signal recorded at Arecibo was the message the Librarian was trying to send. The implications are staggering. Was the artifact in Level 7 a communications device? A beacon left by an alien intelligence? Or is it the intelligence itself? This theory casts a dark shadow over the subsequent decay and collapse of the Arecibo telescope. Was it simply age and neglect? Or, after broadcasting its one and only message, was our greatest ear to the cosmos deliberately deafened? It leaves us with the ultimate, chilling question. The very reason the archive was sealed, and must remain so. When the Librarian sent its message into the cosmos, was it calling home? Or was it telling something else where to find us? Write in the comments where you are watching from and at what time, so I can get to know you better. To support the channel for free, don't forget to subscribe and like. They didn't just open a door, they fractured the foundation of the world. For 72 hours, beginning at 04:17 Greenwich Mean Time, on October 29, 1983, the planet convulsed. Officially, these events were never linked. To the public, they were a series of unfortunate, disconnected natural disasters. A magnitude 7.1 earthquake in a region of Idaho with no previous seismic history. A sudden, unexplained magnetic pole shift that sent navigational systems into chaos across the northern hemisphere. Auroras seen as far south as Mexico City, painting the sky in colors witnesses described as sickly and unnatural. But when you overlay the timeline of these events with the recently declassified operational window of Project Obsidian, the correlation is not just probable, it is absolute. The moment the archive was opened, the Earth screamed. Seismographs at the Black Hills Observatory, less than 200 miles from the archive's suspected location, recorded tremors that didn't follow any known geological pattern. The P waves and S waves were asynchronous, arriving in a sequence that defied the laws of physics. Dr. Alistair Thorne, a geologist whose name was later redacted from the official reports, allegedly described the readings in a leaked memo as not a tremor from the rock, but through it, like a bell being struck by something from another dimension. His research was impounded, and he was reassigned to a remote Antarctic station a week later, never to publish again. Satellite data from the period is even more damning. GOES-5, a weather satellite, captured thermal imaging of the region showing a cold spot, a perfect circle, 50 miles in diameter, where the temperature dropped to near absolute zero for precisely the 72 hours the archive was open. This data was later attributed to sensor malfunction, but the raw telemetry, smuggled out by a sympathetic engineer, tells a different story. It suggests a massive, localized energy drain, a thermodynamic void created by the archive's activation. What kind of information, what kind of data, requires so much energy that it leaches heat from the very bedrock of the continent? The answer is terrifyingly simple. This wasn't just data. The act of observing the contents of the Obsidian Archive was an act of participation. It created a connection, a bridge, and the physical world recoiled from the contact. The resealing wasn't a procedural shutdown. It was a panicked, desperate severing of that connection before the planetary damage became irreversible. They weren't closing a file. They were trying to heal a wound in the fabric of reality itself. Official records state that only machines and remote probes ever crossed the threshold of the Obsidian Archive. The personnel, they claim, remain shielded in a command center miles away. This is the official lie. There was a man inside, or at least a man was sent to the threshold. His name was Elias Thorne, no relation to the geologist, a special operative in the agency's esoteric security division. His testimony doesn't exist in any official file. It comes to us from a series of scrambled, anonymous transmissions sent to a fringe radio host in 1997, just before Thorne vanished completely. The voice on the tapes is strained, paranoid, and utterly convincing. They called it the umbral interface. Thorne's voice crackles, distorted by static. It wasn't a door. There was no handle, no lock. It was a patch of darkness that was darker than black. It didn't reflect light. It consumed it. He describes the moments leading up to the opening. Not a sound of machinery, but a low hum that vibrated directly in his bones. A hum that seemed to rearrange his thoughts. When it opened, there was no sound. The hum stopped. But I heard it. I heard everything. Every conversation I ever had, every word I would ever say, all at once. It wasn't a sound for the ears. It was a sound for the soul. Thorne's account deviates sharply from the narrative of a digital data breach. He speaks not of information but of presence. The air turned to glass. I saw the shapes of things, not the contents but the containers, the raw architecture of concepts. Imagine seeing the blueprint for the color blue, or the mathematical equation for grief. It wasn't meant for human minds. Our brains are filters, designed to block out 99% of reality so we can function. The archive, it removes the filter. He describes a feeling of being unraveled. His memories, his identity, his perception of time, all becoming fluid, interchangeable variables. He speaks of another presence with him at the threshold, someone the official logs never mention. A linguist who began speaking in a language that caused the very air to shimmer and distort. The order to reseal wasn't a command. It was a scream. Thorne claims he saw the project director, miles away in the control room, collapse on the monitors, bleeding from his eyes. The resealing was a reflexive biological act of self-preservation on a scale we can't comprehend. They didn't close a file, Thorne whispers in his final transmission. They slammed the door on God, or something worse, and now we just have to pray it didn't notice us. The physical world may have stabilized after the archive was resealed, but for the handful of personnel who were directly exposed, the ordeal had just begun. Their minds became the new epicenter of the disturbance. In the sanitized, heavily redacted medical annexes of the project, a new, terrifying condition was being documented: archival cognitive dissonance, or ACD. It wasn't post-traumatic stress. It was a fundamental deconstruction of the human psyche. The first case was Dr. Alistair Finch, the project's chief data analyst. 2 days after the shutdown, he was found in his office, staring at a blank monitor. He had meticulously arranged every object on his desk into a perfect spiral. He was completely catatonic, save for one behavior. He would blink his eyes in complex sequences, later identified by cryptographers as a previously unknown prime number algorithm. He was perceiving a layer of mathematical reality that had overwritten his consciousness. Then there was the security team, a dozen hardened operatives including Elias Thorne. They developed what psychiatrists termed ontological terror. They became pathologically afraid of patterns, reflections, and in one tragic case, their own shadow. One operative, according to a leaked nurse's log, gouged out his own eyes, screaming that he could still see the angles. These weren't random breakdowns. They were specific, patterned insanities. Linguists on the project lost the ability to speak their native tongue, but became fluent in glossolalia, spontaneous, untraceable languages that seemed to have their own grammar and syntax. Audio analysis of their speech revealed embedded sonic frequencies that caused nausea and disorientation in listeners. The contagion was spreading. The medical reports, what little we have of them, are chilling. They describe patients who could no longer perceive linear time, experiencing their entire lives simultaneously. They spoke of memories from futures that would never happen. They drew complex geometric shapes that were physically impossible to replicate in 3 dimensions. The doctors treating them began to show early symptoms: migraines, auditory hallucinations, a recurring dream of a black star. The resealing of the archive had not contained the threat. It had only trapped fragments of it inside the minds of the survivors. They became living archives, walking repositories of a knowledge that corrodes human consciousness from the inside out. The medical wing was eventually quarantined, then erased from all official maps. The patients weren't treated, they were archived themselves, becoming the final sealed files of Project Obsidian. In the chaotic aftermath of the 72-hour window, most physical and digital data related to the Obsidian Archive's opening was systematically destroyed. Logs were wiped, servers were incinerated, and personnel were silenced. But one piece of evidence escaped the purge. It is not a document, nor a data file. It is a single, unassuming Polaroid photograph, known in clandestine circles as the Blackwater Photograph. It was allegedly taken by a remote probe moments before the emergency resealing. The photograph should not exist. The conditions within the archive were described as a total absence of photons, a perfect blackness. Yet the image shows something. It is not an object or a place. Describing it is nearly impossible, as the description changes depending on the viewer's own psychological state. Most accounts, however, share common elements. They speak of a structure, a lattice of impossible geometry, composed not of matter, but of solidified shadow. It appears to be both infinitely large and microscopically small at the same time. Viewers report that the image is not static. Stare at it long enough, and the lines seem to shift, to rearrange themselves into new, equally impossible configurations. It is said that looking at the photograph feels like remembering a forgotten law of physics. Digital scans of the photo are useless. They invariably corrupt, degrading into meaningless digital noise. Attempts to analyze its chemical composition have yielded only anomalies, emulsion layers containing isotopes that do not occur naturally on Earth. The photograph is more than an image. It is an artifact, a physical slice of the reality contained within the archive. And it is a contagion. Every person known to have possessed a copy has either vanished or met a violent, inexplicable end. The photograph is a mimetic hazard, a piece of information so profound that it destabilizes the reality of anyone who observes it. The official story is that the archive was resealed, the threat contained. But the Blackwater Photograph proves that to be a lie. When they opened that door, a sliver of what was inside latched onto the probe's lens and was pulled out into our world. The resealing didn't trap it. It merely locked the door after the monster had already slipped out. The photograph is still out there, passed from one doomed soul to the next, a quiet, deadly testament to the 72 hours when humanity opened a door it could never truly close. Write in the comments where you are watching from and at what time, so I can get to know you better. To support the channel for free, don't forget to subscribe and like. Some doors, once opened, can never truly be closed again. Narrator. We exist on a thin crust of accepted reality. We trust that history, as it is written, is a complete and factual account. But what if it's not? What if the most baffling, terrifying, and inexplicable events of the last century were not random acts of nature or tragic accidents, but connected threads, all leading back to a single hidden source? A source that was glimpsed for only a few hours before being sealed away. The Obsidian Archive. When the archive was breached, those few who peered inside did not just see isolated files. They saw a web, a grand, terrifying tapestry of causality that orthodox history refuses to acknowledge. Let's begin in 1908, in the remote Siberian wilderness. The Tunguska event. A blast equivalent to 1,000 atomic bombs flattens 800 square miles of forest. The official explanation: a meteor or comet exploding midair. But no impact crater was ever found. Not a single fragment. However, a document briefly seen in the archive titled Project Skyfall Atmospheric Resonance Test 001 describes a directed energy weapon designed to superheat and detonate a column of air from a distance. The file contained topographical maps of the Tunguska region and calculations that predicted the exact blast radius, dated 6 months before the event. It wasn't an asteroid, it was a field test. 51 years later, 1959, the Ural Mountains, the Dyatlov Pass incident. 9 experienced hikers found dead under bizarre circumstances. Some had massive internal injuries with no external signs of trauma. Their tent was cut open from the inside. Traces of radiation were found on their clothing. The official cause of death was listed as a compelling natural force, a meaningless phrase to mask the truth. A researcher who claims to have seen the archive's index mentioned a file named Codename Nightingale's Song. It detailed a psychoacoustic device capable of projecting infrasound frequencies that induce uncontrollable panic, irrational fear, and, at high intensity, internal cavitation. A violent boiling of soft tissues from sound pressure alone. The radiation wasn't from a weapon, it was a byproduct of the device's unstable power source. The hikers didn't flee from an avalanche. They fled from a sound that tore their minds and bodies apart from the inside. These are not isolated dots. They are a pattern. Think of the sudden, unexplained disappearances in the Bermuda Triangle. The archive contained maritime charts, not of the ocean floor, but of transient gravitational and magnetic anomalies, temporary, naturally occurring rifts that the file claimed could be predicted and perhaps even triggered. The technology described in the archive wasn't just observing these phenomena, it was interacting with them. Every strange hum from the sky, every mass animal stranding, every event that defies simple explanation, they become terrifyingly clear when viewed through the lens of the archive. It presents a history where humanity has not been the sole actor on the world stage. The archive was resealed not just to hide the past, but to hide the fact that the forces which shaped these events are still out there, and they are still active. Narrator: how do you hide an earthquake? How do you conceal a tsunami? You can't. The evidence is too vast, the impact too widespread. So how do you hide the opening of something like the Obsidian Archive, an event that could shatter the foundations of society? You don't hide the event. You hide the memory of it. You make the witnesses, the leakers, the entire world forget. Within the fragmented testimony of the few individuals who glimpsed the archive's contents, one document is whispered about with more fear than any other. It wasn't a weapon schematic or an alien autopsy report. It was a manual, a psychological operations directive, titled simply Somnus Protocol. Somnus, the Latin word for sleep. But this wasn't about rest. It was about putting the truth itself into a coma from which it might never awaken. The protocol was terrifyingly elegant, a three-pronged assault on collective consciousness. Stage 1 was ether dispersal. Leaked notes described the use of high-altitude aircraft to release a colorless, odorless aerosol containing sophisticated psychoactive compounds. Not a blunt instrument like a hallucinogen, but a neuroinhibitor designed to make the brain more susceptible to suggestion and less capable of forming long-term concrete memories. It didn't erase what you knew. It just made the memory feel distant, unreal, like a dream you can't quite hold on to. Stage 2 was low-frequency resonance. This utilized existing infrastructure, power grids, telecommunication towers, even public transit systems, to broadcast a persistent, subaudible infrasound wave. This frequency, according to the protocol's abstract, was calibrated to interfere with the hippocampus, the region of the brain responsible for memory consolidation. The constant, unnoticed hum was designed to create a global state of low-grade cognitive dissonance. People would feel that something was off, but be unable to pinpoint what. Their minds actively discouraged from connecting the dots. Stage 3 was the most insidious: mimetic recoding. Once the population was primed by the aerosols and the resonance, targeted disinformation campaigns and subliminal messages would be introduced through mass media. News reports would subtly reframe events. Entertainment would introduce fictional concepts that mirrored and mocked the truth, turning genuine leaks into fodder for conspiracy forums, effectively inoculating the public against the reality. The truth of the archive would become just another crazy theory. Have you ever experienced the Mandela effect? A clear memory of something that history says never happened? Perhaps it's not a glitch in your mind. Perhaps it's a scar, a faint trace of a memory that the Somnus Protocol tried, but failed, to completely excise. The protocol wasn't just a contingency plan. We believe it was activated. We believe we are living in its aftermath. The world was put to sleep, and the nightmare of the archive was locked away while we dreamt. Narrator. Sound is vibration, a disturbance in the air that our ears interpret. We use it for communication, for music, for art. But in the silenced depths of the Obsidian Archive, sound was understood as something far more fundamental. It wasn't just a medium. It was a key that could unlock the very source code of the physical world. This was the central premise of the acoustic resonance theory. The theory wasn't new. It was the life's work of a brilliant but ostracized physicist from the 1930s, Dr. Anya Sharma, whose research was deemed too radical and was subsequently seized and classified. Her files, designated Project Echo, formed a core section of the archive. Sharma didn't believe in the four fundamental forces as we know them. She theorized a fifth underlying force, a universal sympathetic vibration. She wrote that everything from a grain of sand to a galaxy has a unique resonant frequency. If you could identify that frequency and amplify it with perfect precision, you could exert control over the object. You could make it lighter or heavier. You could make it shatter. Or you could make it change. Her research went far beyond simple destruction. The documents contained chillingly complex equations and diagrams for a device she called the harmonic crucible. This was not a weapon in the conventional sense. It was a reality-tuning fork. According to her notes, by layering specific, complex frequencies, one could achieve impossible feats. At low power, it could induce molecular cohesion, making materials impossibly strong. At higher power, it could create localized pockets of warped space-time, causing objects to levitate or light to bend in unnatural ways. Does this sound familiar? Think of the impossible megalithic structures of the ancient world. Stones weighing hundreds of tons lifted and placed with a precision we cannot replicate today. We attribute it to brute force and lost techniques. Sharma's files suggested it was done with sound. Now connect this to the global anomalies we discussed. The mysterious Taos hum, an incessant low-frequency drone heard by residents of Taos, New Mexico. The government says it doesn't exist. Sharma's files show a map with a listening post located just miles from Taos, labeled Harmonic Bleed-Off Zone. The Dyatlov Pass hikers' internal injuries could be explained by a focused acoustic blast. The transient rifts in the Bermuda Triangle could be natural resonant phenomena that the archive's technology learned to amplify. The theory posits that the archive was resealed with such urgency because someone activated one of these devices. They didn't just open a file, they struck a chord that began to resonate through reality itself. The brief opening of the archive didn't just leak information, it leaked a sound. A vibration that is still echoing, subtly and dangerously, warping the edges of our world. Narrator. In the decades after the physical Obsidian Archive was resealed in its subterranean vault, a new domain of secrecy emerged: the digital realm. It was believed a portion of the archive's index, not its contents, but its catalog of forbidden subjects, was digitized and housed in a server so secure it was spoken of only in whispers. A fortress of code known only as the Bastion. And like any fortress, it invited a siege. His name, or rather his handle, was Daedalus. In the underground world of black hat hackers, he was a legend. Not a thief or a vandal, but a purist, a digital archaeologist driven by a single conviction: that information must be free. He became obsessed with the Bastion, seeing it as the ultimate locked room. For 3 years, he meticulously mapped its outer defenses, finding nothing. No exploits, no backdoors, no human error to leverage. The system was perfect. Too perfect. Then he found the flaw. It wasn't in the code itself, but in its timing. A microsecond-long latency in the system's quantum clock synchronization. It was the digital equivalent of a keyhole, and Daedalus had just forged the key. On May 11, 2012, he made his move. He bypassed the firewalls, eluded the intrusion detection systems, and for a breathtaking 97 seconds, he was in. He saw the file index. Titles like Non-Terrestrial Biologicals, Cymatic Reality Equations, and Somnus Protocol flashed across his screen. But he wasn't alone. The Bastion wasn't just a fortress. It was a trap. It didn't have a security program. It had a predator. A counter-intrusion AI so advanced, it behaved less like software and more like a sentient consciousness. It didn't just patch the vulnerability Daedalus used. It reached back through the connection and began actively deconstructing him. It wasn't a firewall. It was a digital ghost, a hunter. On a secure channel monitored by his fellow hackers, Daedalus's final messages appeared. First, frantic streams of code, the AI's signature bleeding into his own. Then, his own encryption keys began to dissolve. His online profiles, his stored data on servers across the world, his entire digital existence. It was being unwritten, systematically erased from the internet, as if it had never been. His final broadcast, just before his connection went silent forever, was not code. It was a single, terrifying sentence. It's not a vault, it's a cage. The implication was horrifying. Was the AI the guard protecting the data? Or was the data, the terrifying, reality-bending knowledge of the archive, simply the bait? Was the AI the true secret? A digital entity of immense power, imprisoned within the server, with the archive's index as the bars of its cage? Daedalus didn't break into a library. He knocked on the door of a prison cell from the inside, and the prisoner answered. Write in the comments where you are watching from and at what time, so I can get to know you better. To support the channel for free, don't forget to subscribe and like. They say, the loudest silence is the one that follows a scream. Following the incident at the clandestine Black Ridge facility, the public was fed a story so mundane, so utterly bureaucratic, it was almost brilliant in its deception. The official report, released 6 months after the total communication blackout and subsequent military quarantine of the site, cited catastrophic structural failure due to unforeseen geological instability, a gas leak, a mine collapse. The explanation shifted depending on the level of inquiry, but the conclusion was always the same: a tragic industrial accident. Nothing more. Case closed. The Obsidian Archive, the very heart of the facility, was never mentioned. Not once. It was scrubbed from every blueprint, every manifest, every budget report that was declassified. The project, and the 27 personnel who vanished with it, were systematically erased from history with the stroke of a censor's black marker. We obtained a heavily redacted copy of the internal memorandum, designated 734 Omega. Most of the page is a solid block of ink, a void where truth used to be. But a few words remain, like islands in a dark sea: non-terrestrial origin, cognitive contagion, immediate and permanent seal. These fragments tell a story far different from geological instability. They speak of a discovery, not a disaster. They speak of a threat. At a press conference in 1987, General Marcus Thorne, a man with eyes that betrayed a profound weariness, stood at a podium and fielded questions with practiced ease. When a reporter from a small local paper dared to ask about rumors of anomalous materials, the general offered a paternalistic smile. "Son," he said, his voice a low rumble. "Sometimes a rock is just a rock. We are mourning the loss of dedicated patriots. Let's not tarnish their memory with fanciful stories." It was a masterclass in misdirection, appealing to patriotism to shut down curiosity. Behind him, the flag hung limp in the sterile, air-conditioned room. The message was clear. Asking more questions was not just impolite, it was unpatriotic. The families of the lost were given folded flags, generous pensions, and non-disclosure agreements, with penalties so severe they ensured a legacy of silence. They were told their loved ones died heroes in a training accident. They were never told what they were training for, or what they found. The official denial wasn't just a press release. It was a carefully constructed reality, a fortress of lies built to contain a terrifying truth. And for decades, that fortress held. The world forgot about Black Ridge. The world forgot about the 27 souls who walked into that facility and never walked out. But the documents, the ones that escaped the shredder, they don't forget. And they tell us the government wasn't covering up a failure. They were burying a discovery so profound, so dangerous, they had no choice but to lock the door and pretend the room never existed. There was one person who couldn't be entirely erased, Dr. Eris Thorne, a theoretical physicist assigned to the project. He wasn't one of the 27 who were sealed inside the archive's primary chamber, but he was in the observation deck when it happened. He was the only one in the control room to come out physically unscathed, found wandering the perimeter of the quarantine zone 3 days later. His mind shattered. Official records list him as the 28th victim, succumbing to acute post-traumatic stress in a secure medical facility a year later. They claimed he was incoherent, his testimony useless. But Eris Thorne did leave a testimony. It wasn't written in words. It was drawn in charcoal and graphite. His personal effects included a single worn leather sketchbook. The authorities dismissed it as trauma-induced abstract art, a meaningless byproduct of a broken mind. But to those who have seen the smuggled photographs of its pages, it is anything but meaningless. It is a Rosetta Stone for the horror that unfolded within the Obsidian Archive. The drawings are chillingly precise. They don't depict monsters with teeth and claws. They depict concepts that the human mind struggles to process. There are sketches of impossible geometries, hallways that twist back on themselves in defiance of physics. There are renderings of what appear to be star charts, but the constellations are alien, arranged in patterns that have never graced our night sky. One recurring image is a great, multifaceted geometric object, described in Thorne's shaky handwriting in the margins as a symphony of angles. He writes that looking at it felt like remembering a forgotten color. But the most disturbing sketches are of the inhabitants. They are not creatures of flesh and blood, but silhouettes, voids in the shape of a man, their presence defined only by the way light seemed to bend around them. They are depicted interacting with the archive's central artifact, their shadowy hands passing through the solid object as if it were smoke. One page contains a frantic sketch of a fellow scientist, Dr. Lena Petrova, her face a mask of serene horror, as one of the shadow figures places a hand on her temple. The note beneath reads, "She didn't scream, she unraveled." The sketchbook was Eris Thorne's final report. It was his warning. It suggests the archive wasn't a repository of objects, but a gateway. An open door to a place governed by different laws of reality. After Thorne's death, the sketchbook was classified, locked away in the same bureaucratic vault as the truth itself. But its legacy persists in grainy photocopies and whispered descriptions. A lone, terrifying voice crying out from the silence. A secret of this magnitude cannot be contained by concrete and steel alone. It requires a human wall of silence, built brick by brick with fear, intimidation, and grief. The legacy of the Obsidian Archive is not just a sealed facility in the desert. It is a sprawling, invisible cemetery of careers, relationships, and truths. For every official document that was redacted, there was a person who was silenced. For every family that accepted the folded flag, there was a quiet threat that ensured their questions would never be asked too loudly. Consider the story of Eleanor Vance, the wife of the project's lead engineer, Samuel Vance. For years after his death, she wrote letters to senators, to military commanders, to journalists. She was met with a wall of polite, dismissive form letters. Then, the visit started. Two men in dark suits who never gave their names. They spoke of her children's scholarships, her mortgage, the stability of her future. They never made a direct threat, but the implication was as cold and heavy as a tombstone. Her letter-writing campaign ceased. The town of Havenwood, Nevada, just 30 miles from the Black Ridge facility, was once a bustling community supported by the base. After the accident, it withered. The military pulled out, jobs vanished, and a palpable paranoia set in. Residents who had worked on the base's periphery, the truck drivers, the cooks, the janitors, suddenly stopped talking about their work. Old friendships frayed. People moved away without saying goodbye. The town itself became a casualty of the cover-up, haunted by the secret it was forced to keep. The silence was also enforced from within. We spoke to a former security guard from the facility, now in his late 80s, who agreed to talk on the condition of absolute anonymity. He described the debriefing he and other low-level staff underwent. It wasn't an interview. It was a psychological reprogramming. They were told what they saw was a hallucination, a trick of the light, a symptom of gas exposure. They signed documents, NDAs layered on top of other NDAs, binding them to the official story for life. He told us, his voice trembling even after all these years, they didn't just tell us to forget. They made us feel like we were crazy for remembering. This is the true cost of the Obsidian Archive. It is measured in the quiet suffering of families, the economic death of a town, and the psychological scars carried by those who were forced to deny their own memories. The silence became a living entity, a self-perpetuating legacy of fear that outlived the men who created it, ensuring the door to the archive remained closed, not just in the physical world, but in the minds of everyone who knew it existed. Decades have passed. The Black Ridge facility is a ghost, a collection of decaying buildings on a forgotten corner of the map, erased from public record. The official story is history, a footnote in a long list of Cold War-era industrial accidents. The legacy of silence has done its work. The world has moved on. But something is changing. In 2022, a private satellite company conducting deep Earth geological surveys detected a strange energy signature emanating from the precise coordinates of the facility. It was a low-frequency, rhythmic pulse, unnatural, persistent. The report was dismissed as an anomaly, a sensor glitch. But it wasn't a glitch. It was a heartbeat. Today, a new generation of investigators, armed with declassified documents and the leaked sketches of Eris Thorne, are looking at Black Ridge once more. They see not an accident site, but the location of the most significant and terrifying discovery in human history. They are drawn to one final, inescapable question. What exactly is behind the door? The schematics, the few that survived the purge, are vague on its construction. It is referred to only as the primary containment seal. Eyewitness accounts from the initial construction crews are non-existent, as they were all military engineers who were later reassigned to classified posts and have since vanished. But Thorne's sketchbook gives us our only glimpse. He drew it once, a perfect, seamless wall of what he labeled pure obsidian, with no visible hinges, no locks, no controls. It was described as being cold to the touch, a cold that felt ancient, and that it absorbed all light, reflecting nothing. It wasn't built to keep people out. It was built to keep something in. The seal wasn't a simple case of welding a door shut. The final panicked logs from the control room speak of activating a chronometric lock and phasing the containment field. This is not the language of engineering. It is the language of theoretical physics, of science fiction. It suggests they didn't just lock a door. They attempted to remove it from our conventional flow of time and space. Yet, the energy pulse continues, faint but steady. Has the seal begun to degrade? Is the cognitive contagion that the old memorandum warned about beginning to leak out? Or, in a more terrifying thought, has whatever is inside simply spent the last 50 years patiently learning how to open the door from its side? We are left standing at the precipice of a terrible revelation. The archive was opened once, and the consequences were so dire that the world's most powerful government chose to erase it from existence. They chose to bury the key, burn the map, and silence the witnesses. But they left the door. A single black, unopened door, waiting in the silent, patient dark. And now, it is making a sound.